Hello my loves, welcome back. For some reason, last month I decided to only read books about vampires. I can't really remember why I decided to do that, but I did. We all know that I love vampires, but I'm typically somewhat disappointed by a lot of modern interpretations of vampires. I wanted to expand my exposure, consumption, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to expand it and give various different, more modern interpretations of vampires a try. I say modern because at least one of the books out here is not modern, but generally they were more modern vampire books. Let me tell you, there were some in here that I really did not enjoy, and there were some that I was very surprised to find that I did enjoy. So we have a bit of a mix here, and I'm quite looking forward to talking about them. Little side note, I have no idea how irritating the reflection on my glasses is. I'm really sorry if it is. I just fancied being able to see today because I usually can't when I film because I've given up on contact lenses, so I usually just don't wear my glasses and can't see very well. But I would just like to be able to see today, so we're trying it out. If it's really irritating, tell me and I'll never wear them again. The first vampire book that I read this month, which kind of kickstarted this actually, I think it might have been that I read this book or started reading this book and then decided I was just going to read vampire books for the rest of the month, and that is The Beautiful. I'm really sorry I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head because this was a Kindle book, but I will put it here so you can see who it's by. I had quite high expectations for this book. My good friend Becky sent me a TikTok where someone was saying this was like a really good book, like the vampire book currently, and I bought it immediately. It follows a woman called Celine who's fleeing from Paris to New Orleans. This is set in 18 something. I can't remember exactly when it's set. There's a serial killer going around in New Orleans and she has to work it out. I don't remember the blurb exactly, but it was that kind of thing. Obviously I knew though that there were vampires in it because of this TikTok. It sounded like right up my street. This book disappointed me so much, and let me tell you exactly why. Basically, that overview on the blurb is somewhat correct. Well, no, it is kind of correct. We do follow Celine after she flees Paris from a traumatic event, which I will not say what the traumatic event was, but it was very obvious to me what it was literally from the first few pages. But I think it's supposed to be like a reveal later in the book, but to me anyway, it was glaringly obvious what had happened. Flees from Paris after that, gets on this boat where all of these other women are going to New Orleans to join a convent, and kind of follows her life settling in there, and these different like mysterious gang who like owns the city almost, with the background of there's these murders that keep occurring and there seems to be a serial killer in New Orleans. That is the premise of the story. Now, my problems with this. That premise sounds really interesting. To me personally, it did not translate in the writing. It was so slow, so boring, and the writing style really not for me. And I've seen a few other people say this in reviews. I appreciate writing style, and what you personally enjoy as a writing style is going to be very different for everyone. So some people may read this and find the writing beautiful, captivating, engaging. For me personally, it felt like it was trying way too hard. There was an overuse of metaphors. There was an overuse of like single sentence, really short sentence paragraphs that was supposed to like pack a punch, but it was just done so repetitively that there was no impact of them, and I was just getting quite annoyed. Felt really like it was trying too hard, honestly, to seem like beautiful and poetic, and I just, for me personally, I don't really think it translated. I don't think it really came across like that. I could tell that very quickly that I did not like the writing style and I was getting quite irritated by it. The other point for me then is because of that, the plot is so slow. Like, this is a, I think, 400 and something page book, which is just a month of things happening. Just a month. And really not a lot happens, honestly. Like, yeah, there's murders going on and stuff. There's things going on with the gangs, there's things going on with the vampires, but not a lot really happens. It was so slow and very, very, very repetitive. Incredibly, incredibly repetitive. I lost count of the amount of times Celine would be going on this thing about how she's scared or feels really weak or whatever, and then there would just be a single line sentence of, but Celine was not, insert adjectives that means weak here. And it was like just constantly, it was really, really, really repetitive. My other main problem with this though, you know, we're talking about vampire books this month. I didn't like the vampires in it. They were boring. They were really, in my opinion, not scary, not threatening in the slightest. The like main guy vampire, who's like the love interest, is frequently referred to as like the devil or just, you know, a bad guy. Never once in the book does he do anything that earns him that name. He just seems like quite a, you know, maybe a bit too aggressive at times, but generally quite a reasonable dude who has quite decent morals. I don't understand, like, it was like they were trying too hard to make him like the morally bad, dark character, but he just didn't act like that at all. He just was like an okay dude, really, who just happened to be a vampire. That was disappointing. The romance as well, not for me. Really not for me. I've said this quite a few times in other fantasy book reviews. They had had 3 conversations and suddenly it was like they were in love with each other. Like, it developed way too quickly. The book is so slow, but at the same time the romance develops so quickly. When they literally don't know each other. They've said maybe like 2 words to each other, maybe a bit more, and most of it's been arguing, and suddenly they're like, I love you. That's not quite what happens, but it didn't feel genuine at all. And I know it's a book about vampires, it's not supposed to be realistic, but did not enjoy it. If I was the type to DNF books, I would have DNF'd this, honestly. I just don't think it was for me. Like I say, some people might really enjoy the writing style and the characters, but I didn't really care about any of the characters. Celine is really irritating. Odette, who is one of the other vampires, basically is Alice Cullen. So she's okay, but she's basically Alice Cullen. The main vampire dude, I don't even remember what his name was. He was meh. He was another wet blanket of a character. I'm getting bored of fantasy or supernatural books who try to sell like this dark, mysterious, bad guy and he's a fucking wet blanket. It's like, it's boring at this point. I don't know why I'm in such a bad mood. This book clearly really got to me and I haven't thought about it since I finished it. Just one more thing on this book before I go on too much of a rant about it. There are chapters throughout from the serial killer's point of view. They were horrific. Every time I got to one of those chapters, I was just like, oh, I don't want to read this. I don't want to read it. It just sounded like a teenage edgelord trying to be like really cool and really dark. And it just, no. In case you couldn't tell, I really did not enjoy this book. It's really not for me. You may like it, you know, if you like vampires that kind of aren't that traditional vampire, quite quick romance, but they're still kind of on and off again, not a lot happening, 19th century New Orleans, you know, maybe you might like it, but it just wasn't for me. I've got it down as 2 stars, but I could not tell you why it's 2 stars and why it's not 1 star, because I can't think of a single good thing about it. So yeah, that's the first one. The next book was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I feel like every time I say Stephanie Meyer's name, I pronounce it differently every time. I have no idea how you actually pronounce her last name. Someone please tell me, because I don't know. I read Midnight Sun specifically because I wanted something nostalgic, easy to read, familiar story after the slog that was The Beautiful. In case you don't know, if you're not in the Twilight universe, like I seem to be stuck in still, Midnight Sun is basically Twilight retold from Edward's point of view. Just the first book, not the whole series. Specifically just the first book. If you're interested in my full thoughts, I've already done a full video on Midnight Sun and basically the reasons I did not really like it. So I would recommend going to watch that if you want my full thoughts and opinions. If you just want a quick summary, bullet points, I did not enjoy how slow it was either. I did not enjoy being inside Edward Cullen's head. That man is whiny and really needs to go to therapy. It was also very repetitive inside Edward's head, incredibly repetitive. I don't feel like we really got anything new from the series. It really was just a more boring version of the original book. I think, yeah, those were the main reasons I didn't like it. The good things, I liked seeing Bella from Edward's point of view. It's just cemented my love for Bella Swan. And it's made me realise that Emmett Cullen is my favourite Cullen. So those were the good things about the book. I rated it 3 stars, so better than The Beautiful, but yeah, still did not really enjoy it. After Midnight Sun, I wanted to go back to the vampire roots. I was like, look, these modern vampire books are just, they're not working. Something's going wrong here. So I read Carmilla by, is his name Joseph? Have I completely made that up? I'm really, again, really bad with names. I'll just put it here somewhere. One of the original vampire books. Not the original, but one of the originals. Carmilla, believed to be one of the things that inspired Dracula by Bram Stoker, and a book that I've been meaning to read for a very long time but just haven't got around to. This is a very short book. I think it's less than 100 pages. I have it on Kindle. Obviously different editions are probably going to be different lengths, but it is very short, and it is, I was going to say it's like queer vampire story, and the general consensus is that it is, but having read it, I mean, for the time, I suppose, yeah, because this was published in, again, the 19th century. So for the time, I suppose, yeah, it is sapphic vampire, original vampire story. I was somewhat disappointed by this book, unfortunately. I think the shortfall of it is that it is quite short. I did still enjoy it. I rated it 3 stars. 3.5 stars, maybe. I think it deserves more than Midnight Sun, so if it's not 3.5, I'll change it to 3.5. Carmilla ends up going past this house in a carriage that she's traveling in with her mum. I'm actually not sure if she's actually her mum or what the relationship is in there, because it's never really explained. But Carmilla is driving past this house in a carriage and there's a crash, I think. The mum is like, I need to keep traveling. You who live in this house, who are our main characters, you need to look after my daughter. She needs to stay here and I will come back for her eventually. It's basically what happened. So Carmilla just ends up staying with this girl of around the same age as her, whose name I don't remember, I'm really sorry, and her dad. And essentially it's looking at the relationship that forms between this girl and Carmilla, which is somewhat romantic, but not explicitly so because of the time that it was published at, and the hints that Carmilla is actually a vampire who is feeding off this other girl, and loads of women in the village. I really liked the characters. I really liked the story. I just wish it had been longer. And that is not like me saying I wish it had been longer because I was enjoying the story and wanted more of it. It's me saying I feel like it needed to be longer. I feel like there were certain things that could have been explained more, and I don't think it needed to be much longer. I think it could have been like maybe, you know, even like an extra few pages. I don't think it needed to be like a full novel. It almost felt like a bit shallow because of how short it was, but it was still really good. And I can see why then it would have then inspired a lot of other vampire stories. I would really recommend it because it's quite short, it's quite easy to read. You can get through it easily in one sitting if you want some classic vampire literature. I think it's my own expectations of it that were the problem, not the actual story itself, not the writing or anything like that. I think I just had like built it up in my head a little bit more, but still really enjoyable. And definitely more enjoyable than the previous 2 books that I had read. The next 4 books are from a series. This is the only one I have a physical book of, and that is Filthy Rich Vampires by Geneva Lee. This, I mentioned in a haul, I bought this a few months ago, and I bought it specifically because I was like, that looks shit. but it'll probably be like fun shit. I saw someone on TikTok the other day, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, talking about like certain books that are almost like the book equivalent of junk food. Like, they're not amazing, they're not works of literature that are going to be talked about for years to come, but you enjoy them anyway. Like, you know junk food's not good for you, but you still enjoy it and it still makes you feel good when you eat it. This book is that. So I actually wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Funnily enough, had got to that point in the month where I was like, I kind of regret doing this. I feel like I need to read like Ali Hazelwood or something, because Ali Hazelwood, to me, her books are not too serious, silly. Again, they're not the best. I might get slightly frustrated at times at the characters, but they're enjoyable and easy to read. This was exactly that. This is not a good book or a good series, because I read the whole series. I read like a book a day. I just could not stop reading this. They are not good books. They're the plot holes galore. World building is iffy, but they were just enjoyable and very, very easy to read. I can't really separate them out because I did read all of them in the space of about 4 or 5 days. If we go back to the beginning of the series, we have our main character Thea, who is a cellist trying to get by. She has a lot of different jobs because she's just trying to make ends meet. She's trying to pay for her mum's cancer treatment, and it's been a lot for her, but she loves music and she's a cellist in a little band, and they are playing for some rich people party. She's playing her cello at the party, and this rich guy from the party across the room sees her. One might even call him filthy rich, and he just looks at her like he hates her. He absolutely hates her. We see his point of view, and we know the problem is she smells better than everyone else, because guess what? Julian, our guy, is a vampire, and he's looking at Thea with hatred because she smells better than anyone else. Is this reminding anyone else of anything? Anyway, he wants to kill her, but he wants to leave her alone. Again, does that remind you of anyone? But obviously their paths just keep crossing and romance happens. This first book is supposed to be fake dating. That's what it says it is on the back. I would say that is a very generous description of what happens in this book. I don't really think it's fake dating at all, or it is for like maybe a page. It really doesn't last very long. Essentially then, the whole series of books go through like Thea and Julian's trials and tribulations of trying to be together, because he's a vampire from a very wealthy, very respected vampire family, and she's just a humble mortal who has no money and no prestige, essentially. It's very dramatic. There's a lot of things happening, but also it feeling somewhat slow at times. It is quite spicy, but I think you could tell. In my opinion, I don't know if this is true, obviously, because I've never spoken to the author, but you could tell by, I don't know what book I would say it was, maybe book 3, maybe even earlier, like book 2 or 3. You could tell the author was just a bit bored of writing those scenes, because they were just either getting progressively shorter or just like fading to black, which is, I found quite funny. The spice in it was like, okay, I'm realizing not really the biggest fan of it in most books, the way it's written, because it all feels very Wattpad-esque, and I have already been through my Wattpad phase many moons ago. So this, I suppose, it didn't necessarily feel Wattpad-y. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst. It didn't make me cringe, I don't think. So yeah, that was a plus, I suppose. It was just a really enjoyable time. It was exactly what I needed after reading quite a few books that I hadn't really enjoyed very much and that had felt very slow. Just being able to binge a series, even though the world building wasn't the best, there are still things that I could not explain to you in the world. One of the main plot points I could not explain to you, particularly because it's not explained very well. Plot holes all over the place, but it was enjoyable. It wasn't the best written, but I had a great time. It was fun. Not the kind of vampire book I was expecting to enjoy, honestly, but I really enjoyed it. It was really good. I would recommend if you're looking for some easy to read vampire fantasy that's, I suppose, vampire romantasy that's not too serious. It's a bit silly, has some great characters in it. Honestly, there were some characters that I did really like, and I was quite sad that we didn't see more of them, but I did really enjoy it, and yeah, would recommend. The final book that I read was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is a book I've been meaning to read for a very long time. I have been aware of Stephen King my entire life. Fun fact, I have the same birthday as Stephen King. Obviously I was not born in the same year as him, but same birthday. And he's like my mum's favourite author. I've been aware of Stephen King my whole life, but I have never read a Stephen King book. And I thought, what better one to start with than the vampire one? Salem's Lot, what is it about? It was a bit confusing. I have to admit, I was quite confused at the beginning of this book. It follows our main guy, Ben, mostly, but we do look in on various different people's lives in this little town of Jerusalem's Lot, or Salem's Lot. There's a house that's scary. I don't really know why I'm struggling to explain the plot of this book so much. It's not really that confusing. There's a scary house that Ben went to as a kid, and he thinks he saw a ghost there. He's come back to Jerusalem's Lot to write a book because he's an author, and then weird things start happening. People start disappearing, whispers of people appearing at people's windows and asking to be let in, new people coming in from out of town that are a bit suspicious, and yeah, it's scary vampires essentially, and that's the worst description of it ever, and I'm really sorry. This book took me a while to get into, definitely. I was, I'll admit, confused and a little bored to begin with for like the first 20-30% of it, and then I did start to get into it. I want to keep reading. I want to know what's going to happen next. Biggest thing I struggled with in this book was how many people there are. This is like about an entire town of people, so there are so many characters in it that it's not necessarily that we're following them. You get little snippets of their lives throughout, and every single time we would like swap between that, I would have to spend like the first page of that just being like, who are you? There was like enough clues in the writing that you could kind of then work out which person was who, but there were times, especially towards the end of the book, where just names were being mentioned that I was like, I have no idea who that is. That was something I struggled with, but you could follow the main cast of characters decently enough. In terms of the actual plot, once I'd got into it, I did really enjoy it. I liked the creepiness of the vampires and what was happening in the town. It felt very, I was gonna say, like in Dracula, like Dracula as a character isn't actually present very much. He's not physically on page or in the room with the characters very much. He's more just like someone that you feel in the background, and to an extent kind of got that feeling with this as well, but I suppose you do actually see the vampires more. There is like almost that mysterious, creepy feeling to it as well. There were times after reading it at night that I was like, I don't want to turn any of these lights off to go upstairs. It definitely did have that atmospheric creepiness, kind of scariness to it, but not too scary because I'm a wimp, so I don't want anything that's too scary. This was like good for me. This was fine. This was decent. What I appreciated about this in comparison to Dracula was the people actually seemed somewhat competent compared to the group of people that come together in Dracula. They weren't like, you know, expert vampire hunters, although even the expert vampire hunter Van Helsing in Dracula was shit. They felt more competent, and it was, again, even though it's supernatural, it felt more believable that they could try and like thwart this vampire or these vampires. It was just very different to like every other book that I read this month, and a lot of the, I appreciate Carmilla isn't modern, but the more like modernish interpretations of vampires, it was obviously published like before Buffy, for example, but around that time of when vampires were, there was still that like sensuality to them, but they were also scary and not particularly attractive either, but could be charming. but not necessarily like the conventionally attractive vampires that we see now. I think that's just what I enjoyed about it. I rated it 4 stars because I did struggle to get into it and I was very confused a lot of the time by who anyone was, and it was a little bit slow at times. I don't think it needed to be as long as it was. I did really enjoy it. That is a whole month of just reading vampire books. I don't really think this has taught me anything in terms of what I should be looking for in vampire books. Aside from that, maybe I should stick more to actual horror rather than like romance. Maybe we'll try some of that, but I had a fun time. Maybe not as fun as I was expecting to have, but I had a fun time. I think I am gonna need a bit of a break from vampire books after this, so I might not read any for a while, but vampires are always gonna be very dear in my heart, so you can always expect there to be some form of vampire content on this channel. I have a video that I cannot wait to do specifically about vampires, but it's just taking me a lot longer to like research it than I was expecting. So I would love to know what you've been reading the past month, vampire or not. I'm expecting probably not vampire, but would love to know if you do have any good vampire book recommendations. Please do let me know. I'm always in the market for more. I still have a few like that I was hoping to get to this month that I didn't because of the Filthy Rich Vampire series. I wasn't expecting to read the whole series. Yeah, I've still got a few to get through, but if you have any recommendations of others, please do let me know. I hope wherever you are, you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.